I'm Péter Földházi Jr. from EPAM Systems, working as a software test automation engineer. And currently, I am working on mobile solutions, and that's my main field here at the company. And especially if it's going to work, then I'm going to go to the next slide. So what I'm going to talk about is how to automate your tests for mobile applications and how to do it effectively. I'm going to talk about this emerging area, so the mobile field, and then I'm going to talk about the basics of automation in this field, and then what you can choose from to automate your tests and how to do it effectively. I'm going to be brief and short, and I hope this short amount of time will be enough for you to understand what I want to show. So, in the past 10 years, mobiles have overtaken this field, and there are more laptops being sold than desktops, and also smartphones and tablets have been sold quite drastically nowadays, and you can see phones everywhere, in all the pockets and hands of everybody. And this means we have to be prepare for this change. We had to prepare for this change, and we still have to seek out new solutions to make good softwares, because the e-commerce customers want to have their very own applications for mobile phones, for iPhones, Android phones, etc. And therefore, we need more iOS developers, Android developers, and of course, testers with mobile knowledge. As you can see, it has increased radically in the past 2 years, or from 2005 to 2013. What are the obstacles of this field? It can be clearly seen on this image, especially if I don't walk over it. So you can see that even the device screens differ, the platforms have different difficulties. So you will approach iOS development and testing differently than you would with Android or Windows Phone. And you have to think about a lot of things, and the amount of testing that is needed to make sure your application works is much more than for a regular desktop or web application. And it's still a young industry, so our knowledge is still not enough. So we have to increase this knowledge every day. And at EPAM, we try to improve it by regularly holding meetups, and sometimes open, sometimes closed ones, and creating new POC applications, testing frameworks, and see how these new tools work out. So the next topic I'm going to talk about is the basics of mobile automation. This is very similar to automation basics, but you can see some differences. So first, of course, you get your test cases from the QA team, and you then, as the automation team, will decide what can be automated. As I said, there are difficulties because of the platforms, so you won't be able to automate as much from the manual scope as with regular desktop or especially web testing. And then you might not have enough automation developers to implement every test case, so you will most probably need to choose some test cases and go with the highest priority ones. And then you don't want to write 12 test scripts when there are only little differences. You want to go through the application. You want to check whether the UI is okay or not, whether the app crashes or not. So you are going to merge these cases and save a lot of time. I mentioned web applications and native applications. And the main difference is that for web, you are going to have difficulties with the different browsers, and you need to check it on different browsers, while on native, it's more the application or the native environment itself that holds difficulties. And you're also going to have different hardwares that you are going to use for expanding the mobile phone or the tablet. And of course, you're not going to, for example, with a fitness application, you're not going to run a half marathon every day. I mean, yeah, I would do that if I had the stamina, and it would be nice to be paid for running. But I guess a customer wouldn't do that, wouldn't pay that much. So maybe you can automate these tests, make mock data, and do it in 2 seconds instead of in 2 hours. That's a good half marathon, actually. So all that said, let's go to what you can choose from to automate your UI tests. One of the options for iOS, and maybe the most popular one, is Apple's UI automation. It's meant for native UI testing, and it's rather easy to use. Even if you don't know JavaScript, you can learn it quite easily. You have a recorder that you can use to click on each element and see these generated scripts, which of course have the problem of not speaking in itself. So when you look at it, you don't know what it is. So you want to hide this code, but that's another topic. So let's move on and see some solutions for Android. The first one is Robotium. It's the most popular one nowadays, as it's the oldest one. And people know it very well. There's a lot of experience behind it. You can easily Google out any solutions whenever you are stuck. So it's quite easy to use, and it's also meant for native testing. Google's Espresso is quite similar, but it still doesn't have the same experience behind it. And it was published less than a year ago by Google, and they did it because they weren't that satisfied with Robotium. So in the long run, maybe it will overtake that tool. And the last one that I'm going to introduce is Appium, which is originally a Selenium WebDriver, and it's meant for web testing. But of course, you can use it for hybrid and native testing as well, but that area is still lacking, so we need to give it a little more time. But of course, if you want web testing and you know Selenium, it will be your choice, most probably. So how to build your framework? I already mentioned that when you have these long scripts, then half a year later, you're not going to understand it anymore, what it meant. Maybe it was login button, or maybe it was a registration button, who knows? You don't, because you don't have comments there, and you don't want to write them. You want to save a lot of time. So therefore, you're going to hide your code, and you're going to write down functions that speak for themselves. So for example, you write down it's a login button, and then you know that it's a login button. And you don't want to copy-paste it every time. For example, if you have a login flow, you are not going to copy-paste it at the beginning of each of your tests, because copy-paste programming is bad. So you're not going to do that. Whenever you want to change something in your code, you have to change it in every one of your tests, instead of changing it at only one place. So that's what facet pattern is about. And I call this the 3-layer testing framework. And this uses the aforementioned facet pattern. And the reason why we have 3 and not 2 layers is because at IPM we have several projects with different customers. And we don't want to work 3 or 4 or 5 times. We want to work only once and reuse our code. So when I create a core layer, a core testing framework, I don't want someone else to redo my work. I want him or her to use mine. And whenever that person creates something new in this core layer, then I can use that as well. So this is an application independent part of the framework. Now let's move on to the test framework. The test framework holds the test scripts. So whatever is being run, is found here in the testing framework. And when your manager wants to know what tests you have written, how they look like, and or your QA lead wants to see it, and he wants you to tell him what the steps are, then you just tell him, hey, look at my code. It speaks for itself. And then he can say, yes, I log in here. Then I go to my profile, edit height and name, and then I log out. Bam. And in the interior layer, you hide all the codes that are not meant for them to see. And how to do that effectively is the next topic. So page models might be familiar for some of you who know Selenium. I approach this a bit differently. So I separate logic from structure, and I call the page model the model of the objects that you can see on the screen. So you have login screen with login button, and you have the user name text field, password text field, etc., etc., and you keep it at one page. So you know what you have on that page. And you're going to store only the elements you want to use in your testing. So this is how it's going to look like. You have the main page. You are going to use only the login button. Then on the login page, you're going to use the username. You're clicking on it, typing your name, Goofy, then clicking on the password, typing your Hello Kitty AK47 password, then login and check whether you landed on the page you had to. So this is how the page model looks like. And contrary to this, flow model is about what you actually do. So you don't really want to know where you are at. Of course, you write assertions, so you need to be sure that you landed on the correct page, but you don't really want to check everything. You just want to go through a flow and see whether the application breaks or not. And here, you're just writing down, I want to start my login process, type my credentials, username, password, and then end the whole process and see whether I landed on my profile page. So combining these methodologies help in building a visible test framework. So you can imagine this as a directed graph. So here, the main page, the login page, and the profile pages are the points, and the route you are taking is written down by the flow model. So these are the edges, the directed edges of this directed graph. Also, if you have heard about the state machine diagram of UML, it might be familiar for you. And how does it look like? So you have the login start, login type username, blah, 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 all the flows here, and then you have the page objects here, and you refer to them this way. So you separate the logic, flow models, and the structure, page model, from each other, so you know where you are and where you go. And I hope this is going to work, but it seems not. Okay. So you still have the same test case that you might recall from the flow model, and you can run it. Just the only difference is that the structure behind it is different. The code behind it is different. So I have 10 seconds left. So I'm closing this presentation. Sorry for being so fast with everything. I tried to, yeah, time's up. So I tried to show everything that is useful in this area for making sure that you can create testing frameworks for mobile applications. You can do it effectively, lowering the maintenance costs, making it easy to read even after 6 months, and to make sure that you can give it to other projects as well, project owners. And in this field, there are several obstacles that we are going to face, and we are the pioneers. This is our time, and we have to find the solutions, and I hope you are going to find us. Thank you.
Thank you, Péter, for this interesting presentation. Maybe we have time for 1 or 2 short questions. Yes?
I suppose you implement further libraries through Bothium. Do you contribute back to the community?
Do I?
Do you contribute your code back to community when you implement additional libraries for Bothium, for example?
Well, for now, it's just an EPAM framework, so not an open source one. Maybe we are going to do that in the far future or near future. It's up to my bosses. So, but we had this in plan. We do share our solutions between each other, between EPAM projects. So yes, we do. And that's what we do in the core layer.
Thank you. One other question? Yes, please. Yes? Yes?
Yeah,
I will translate.
That you develop for iOS and Android platform as well, but do you have a common test suite that you use one test case for both platforms?
Okay, so actually we recently had a POC about that. We used Appium, and for web testing it works. For, well, let me show it to you. Maybe this will help in understanding. Yes. So on native applications, it's not really working out. You can do it, of course, but the time demanded is so high that you wouldn't want to waste your time on it. It's better to go separate. And just one example. So when you want to press a button, then on Android, you do it this way, Android widget button. And on iOS, you click on a UIA button. So you won't be able to use the same test script unless you write a parser that will understand if you say click button, blah, 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 blah. Then on Android, it means this line, and on iOS, it means that line.
So it means it's cheaper to develop the testing twice.
Yes. We actually had, like, I think almost around 1.5 times more time is needed for, or even more than that, for making common code and to write everything below that. So it's quite a big difference.
Thank you. 1.5 minutes left, so maybe one more question. Then I would like to ask you, you mentioned quality people and testing people, and I would like to ask, what is the percentage of these 2 teams within your organization?
You mean the QA team and
Yes.
automation team, or?
How is it organized? So,
Well, it depends on the
from
project.
100 people, how many people work on testing and QA?
Let me recall. There are some numbers. Let me go back. These are numbers from last year, and I think they kind of doubled, because I know that already in Hungary we have like 3 or more, 4 more projects with mobile automation. And I know that mobile testers have, the number of mobile testers have increased as well. So what I know is 8% of EPAM test division is are mobile testers, or were last year. I think it's around 15 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope
very much.
this.
Yes, it would be interesting, but I will ask you in the break about the difference between what the QA team does and the tester do, or how they communicate. It's an interesting story for me.
Okay, okay, you can approach it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again.